Beer is science. Beer is community. Beer is engineering. Beer is the glue that binds us together. Beer is camaraderie. Beer is what lifted us when we were in trouble as humankind. We couldn't drink water, we could drink beer. So beer is a lot of things. And in this talk, I really want to go over those things and really make those things clear. And we'll talk to you about the role that yeast plays in this process, in beer making. So as you can hear, I'm from the Netherlands. It's a beautiful country, beautiful windmills, lots of tulips over there. It's a very small country, sandwiched in between the North Sea, Germany and Belgium. People think about people on wooden shoes, on bikes, and of course lots of cheese, and those things are all true. I did my education over there before I came to the United States. I did my education there before I came to the United States, and I studied microbiology over there. And the reason why I went into microbiology is because I was very interested in the world we couldn't really see around us, but that's there. And that really intrigued me. So what I studied over there is microorganisms living under very extreme conditions. You can imagine, for example, organisms that live in hot vents or organisms that live in salt lakes. So I studied that for a while. How do those organisms do that, right? Under those conditions, how do they survive? And I did it for a long time. And then I made a switch. I came to the United States about 10 years ago. I joined the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, the lab of Lauren Luber, and I switched fields. I went into neuroscience. At least I designed the proteins that we use in neuroscience to image brain activity. So totally different. And it was a great career, you know, everything went well. And I was on my way to become I guess like an end path would be a professor or something like that. And then, but I decided to go into beer science. So, as you can imagine, it was kind of a hard phone call to make with my mom. She was like, "What are you doing that?" But it's the brewing and beer making. There's so much to it. So when you think about the brewing process, there's engineering involved. There's biology involved. Think about the ingredients we use. So there's malted barley. So barley is a plant, obviously, that's grown specifically for beer. Hops, another plant that's used in the process. Water is extremely important. Water chemistry, biochemistry. There's enzymes that are active during the mashing process, in the brewing process, that will convert the starches that are present into sugars that are later on then, microbiology, are being used by the yeast that will turn it then further on into alcohol and CO2. So there's a lot of different fields right there. So you can really, if you think about brewing, there's so much to it. So that's why I was really interested in going into that field. And like I said, yeast, right? Now what is yeast? Yeast is in my opinion, the most important part in the brewing process. The brewer just makes a sugary, sticky liquid. The yeast will actually take that and then convert that into alcohol, CO2, aroma, and flavor, what we like so much. So yeast is a single cellular organism, and if you look at the tree of life, there's basically three clades. There's the bacteria, there's the archaea, and there's the eukaryotes. When you think about bacteria, you can think about bacteria that make yogurt, you can think about pathogens that make you sick, or maybe nitrogen-fixating bacteria that are very useful. And archaea is a clade of those ancient organisms I talked about, that I studied in the past, that live under very extreme conditions. And there's the eukaryotes. Now you can think of the eukaryotes like simpler organisms like fungus, like mushrooms, but also more complex organisms like plants. Humans are also eukaryotes, and actually yeast is also a eukaryote. So when you think about it, yeast and humans are actually quite similar. So yeast and humans are much more similar than, for example, humans and bacteria, or yeast and bacteria. Well, what is the one thing humans like? Humans like sugar. I have to go to the dentist again, because I put so much sugar in my coffee that it's like a returning thing for me. And yeast like sugar as well. So what the yeast does, it will take that sugar and convert it into alcohol and CO2 and those flavors and aromas I was talking about. The reason it does that is because it will create energy for itself. The CO2 and alcohol and the rest is kind of a byproduct, but that's good for us. So that's why the yeast that is being used in the brewing process is called Saccharomyces. So saccharose, saccharomyces, sugar, yeast, basically. So it makes total sense. And it's not just for beer brewing that this yeast is so important. It's for basically every other alcohol beverage production. So think about wine. You know, if you make wine, you need yeast, because wine will turn those sugars that are present in the grapes into alcohol and CO2. CO2 obviously will evaporate out of the barrels, but champagne still has it. Like I said, wort, so the sugar is stickery liquid. You know, yeast will turn it into alcohol and CO2. But also when you make, for example, corn whiskey, you have to make a mash. The yeast will turn those starches and sugars that are present in that mash into alcohol, CO2, aromas and flavors before it's distilled. So it's extremely important. So every process that produces alcohol, yeast plays a very important role. And there's of course all kinds of different strains of yeast. So, you know, you can make a selection right there. Now, if we go back to the brewing process and we think about it a little bit more, what is it actually we do, right? So it's a very regimented process. So it's like several steps that you take and you end up at a certain point. So you start with the mash, you know, then you filter that off, then you do the boil, and it's like that for basically every brewery in the world. You know, there's maybe small changes, but that's what it is. So it's a very regimented process that the brewer goes through because he's interested in getting the same product all the time. That's very important, right? That's what the consumer likes. Now, the yeast is essential in this, like I said before. So it will take whatever the sugary liquid the brewer makes and turn it then into beer. Now, if you think about it, you know, so it's basically like this straightforward process. There's another depiction over here where you can see the different ingredients. It's basically like a straight line. You know, you start over here, you go through the motions, you use like a store-bought yeast that most of the breweries do, and then you end up over there. It's basically always the same. And we as humans are very good at engineering and controlling things. So nowadays these breweries are marvels of industry of engineering. There's like control panels everywhere. It's all computer operated, at least most of them, so that we control exactly what's going on. Which is of course what we want, but it also kind of takes away from the things we can do. So what if we, instead of going like a straight road, right, by starting like with the ingredients we have, and then just going straight to the end point, what if we would take another road, like take a side road, like take a path less traveled, so to speak. And instead of using the yeast that you can normally buy that will give the beer that is normally produced, if you would go outside and try to isolate yeast from the outside where yeast is just present and see if we can end up with different beers and kind of break that pattern. So that's what we did. So we went outside and we started to isolate strains, see if it would turn out into a beer that we would really like. So here you can see some pictures. So for example, we went to upstate New York, to the Finger Lakes region. Beautiful area where there's like lakes that are kind of like fjords. There's a lot of wine growing there, beautiful area. So very pittoresque. Obviously, there's like yeast over there, so we found some nice strains and we were able to use those. And it turned into a beer that was very different than what you normally would make. So the yeast played a key role in that. But not just that, not just those kind of locations. Like yeast is like omnipresent, you could say. Like microbial life is everywhere. So we are also able to isolate strains from the street behind my house, which is just this suburban area. It doesn't look very appealing. It's basically like this major road. But the strains that we were able to get from that place were really good. They gave a beer that was very unexpected, very mellow, very nice. We were able to isolate strains from old barrels that were excavated in Washington, D.C., that were used a long time ago by a defunct brewery now. And we were able to get yeast from that by scraping those barrels and growing that up. So the yeast there really turned that beer into something totally different. And actually when you compare it to ales from now, it's like totally different than you would, those two beers would be incomparable. It was much more fruity, it was much more characterful, something that we'd never ever could have imagined. And then last but not least, we collaborated with Paleo Quest, trying to get yeast from fossils they would find out of these dismal swamps. So you can see a picture of that over there. So with Paleo Quest, we were able to get yeast from these bones. So they would find fossils, bring them up from these swamps, and I was very against it. I was like, there's no way there's going to be yeast on these bones. But I was wrong. You know, we went to the museum, we swapped those bones, we did some testing. There were some strains that were not very good, but there were some that were really nice. And we brewed a beer with that bone tosters, and it was very nice. It was a very interesting strain. It was again something different, something we never expect. So by giving basically the reins to the yeast, we got into places that we would never have imagined we could have gone to. So it's basically what I want to take home message for you is it's a perfect partnership. We basically provide the yeast with what it needs, and we'll make sure it has the sugar it needs by doing the brewing process. And then the yeast will take it from there and will produce something out of it. So by going outside of the normal lines, trying to go somewhere else, we were able to expand the palate. And the next time when you are trying a beer you might have never had, just think about that, what the yeast will do in that beer. That it's not just the brewer that has like a certain say over the recipe, but that the yeast is instrumental in giving that flavor and that aroma to that beer as well. And that's kind of what I wanted to tell the story. So thank you very much.